The term avant-garde has been used to describe much of the work in the modernist tradition. The term originated in the French military to describe the front ranks of soldiers who led the army into battle. Starting with the realists, the avant-garde came to describe artists who stayed ahead of the curve by challenging conventional notions of art making. Much of modernism is defined by this type of experimentation or even disregard for past sensibilities. Today, when we visit historical art museums, we are bound to see examples of Impressionist paintings. Names like Degas, Monet, and Renoir roll off of our tongues as being practically synonymous with paintings in the Western fine art tradition. Although, this general acceptance of Impressionism was not always the case. When this avant-garde group emerged in Paris in the 1870s, they were seen as unskilled troublemakers, if not direct threats to the existing painting tradition. Thanks to the precedents set by Courbet's Pavilion of Realism, the Impressionist artists were able to bypass the salon entirely and stage their own group exhibitions. The name Impressionism was not coined by the artists themselves, although this painting by Claude Monet, entitled Impression Sunrise, served as its inspiration. A critic who attended their inaugural exhibition came out feeling incensed and a little confused by the unfinished-looking paintings being displayed. In his view, these were more sketches or impressions than finished works of art. Claude Monet was a rebellious young artist who experimented early in his career with the style of realism. In school, when he was encouraged to make painted copies of already existing masterworks, he preferred instead to paint scenes from nature. Monet was an early proponent of the plein air painting style. Plein air painting is French for open air, or painting landscapes on location. Again, this ability was only made possible by the manufacturing of paints in the tube. Why would artists continue to paint natural scenes in their studios if they can paint in the environment itself? This painting by the American realist John Singer Sargent depicts Claude Monet painting in the plein air style. Monet found there to be a disconnect between what a studio artist paints and how our eyes actually perceive the world around us. He learned from Isaac Newton a couple centuries earlier that all colors of the visible spectrum are always present in white light. Whenever we use local color to describe the blue of a lake or the green of grass, we are making a generalization. Many other spectral hues can be observed beyond local color, and all it takes is a closer look. It was the goal of Impressionists like Monet to perceive reds and oranges in the water and blues and yellows in the grass. Monet's loose application of paint makes his subjects appear to swell and blur within their environments. This appearance was both a stylistic decision as well as a working necessity. Monet tried not to invent very much beyond what he saw. He wanted his hand to be like a scientific device able to process and record the colors that his eyes observed. Monet was particularly interested in the way that light affects how we see colors and values. Quality of light is dictated by the specific season of the year as well as the exact time of day. Monet was known to only work on an individual canvas for the amount of time that the light remained consistent. For this painted series of haystacks, for instance, the artist would only have been able to work on a specific canvas for possibly an hour. Once the light changed with the time of day, he would have to put the canvas down and work on another. The next day, weather permitting, he could bring out the previous canvas and work for another hour. By working this way, he might have 12 successive canvases that would take a matter of weeks to complete in unison. Monet's later work became increasingly more abstract. It was almost as if the forms in his landscapes became secondary to the color itself. This massive triptych of water lilies from 1920 is on permanent display at the Museum of Modern Art. From a distance, the forms of the plants can be seen floating on the surface of the water. Up close, though, all that can be made out is a swirling of greens, violets, and oranges. Monet was able to paint scenes like this by working on a specially outfitted boat, as illustrated in this painting by his friend and colleague Edward Manet. I know that it's easy to get the names of these two artists confused, but please be considerate. Manet hates it when he has to take Monet's calls.